What if you're not waiting on love, you're being prepared for it? I recently read Married in 12 Months or Less by Jackie Dorman, and there were several ideas in this book that really made me stop and think. And I want to share them with you, not simply repeating what the author said, but by talking about what I took away from it and how I think these ideas can apply to anyone who is waiting and wondering, when is it finally going to happen for me? Because you're waiting for marriage, because you're waiting for a relationship, because you're waiting for a career opportunity, a breakthrough, or something else you've been praying for about a long time. And one of the biggest ideas I took from this book is this. Sometimes we're so focused on waiting for the thing we're praying for that we don't realize there may be something we need to do while we're waiting. Stop just waiting, start preparing. One section of the book really challenged me. The author talks about the difference between having a promise and going through the process. In other words, just because you believe something is going to happen doesn't mean you sit back and do nothing until it does. If you genuinely believe something is coming, you prepare for it. Think about it. If you knew you were going on a major trip 6 months from now, you wouldn't wait until the morning of the trip to start preparing. You'd make plans, you'd get your passport, you'd figure out what you're going to pack, you'd research where you're going, you'd prepare. And the author applies the same concept to relationships. If marriage is something you genuinely believe is possible for you, what would it look like to start preparing for it now? Not obsessing over when it's going to happen, not desperately searching for someone, but preparing yourself. And I think that's a really important distinction because waiting can become an excuse for staying exactly where we are. Preparation is different. Preparation says, I'm not just waiting, I'm becoming ready. What if disappointment has created a blind spot? Another idea from the book really stood out to me. Sometimes our past disappointments change what we're able to see. If you've been disappointed over and over again, you may begin expecting disappointment. And when you expect something bad, you can actually overlook something good that's right in front of you. There's a story in the book about someone looking for a seat and eventually finding one. The story was about the girl really wanted to hear a speaker, but she thought she couldn't find a seat in a crowded theater because nothing good ever happens for her, or so she thought. But then Jackie went around and looked and actually found her a seat and gave the girl the seat. This shows that what we believe can affect our outcome. The point really isn't about the seat, it's about expectation. When you're looking for something with hope, you're more likely to notice opportunities than you might otherwise miss. And I thought, how often do we do the opposite? And eventually we start telling ourselves, it's probably not going to happen for me. Everyone good is already taken. Men like that don't exist. I'm too old. I've waited too long. And once you start believing those things, you might begin seeing evidence everywhere that confirms them. That's what I found so interesting about this book. Sometimes the problem isn't that there are no possibilities. Sometimes our expectations are affecting what we're able to see. Sometimes God uses other people to help us see what we can't. Another point I took away from the book is that we aren't necessarily supposed to figure everything out by ourselves. Sometimes God puts people in our lives who can believe for us when struggling to believe for ourselves. And I think most of us have experienced this in some way. Maybe you've had a friend say, I really think you're going to be okay, or I don't think you should give up. Or maybe someone saw something in you that you couldn't see in yourself. Sometimes other people can see our potential more clearly than we can because we're too close to our own disappointment. That's why community matters. And it's also why we have to be careful about isolating ourselves when we're discouraged. Sometimes the person God uses to encourage you is sitting right there in your life. What you believe affects who you become. One of the things I keep thinking about throughout the book was the connection between our beliefs and our behavior. What you believe about yourself affects how you act, and how you act repeatedly eventually becomes part of who you are. Our beliefs can influence what we accept, what we reject, what we pursue, and even what we notice. And that's why healing matters. Look for the good, but don't ignore what you need to see. There was another part of the book that I really appreciated. The author encourages readers to look for the good in people. And I think that's important because sometimes we can become so focused on finding what's wrong that we don't give someone a fair chance. We can become hypercritical. We're looking for the perfect person, but there is no perfect person. Everyone has flaws. Everyone has things they're still working on. That doesn't mean we should ignore serious warning signs. That does mean we need to learn the difference between imperfection and danger. And I think that's where discernment comes in. You can give someone the opportunity to show you who they really are without immediately assuming the worst. And at the same time, you don't have to ignore something unhealthy just because you want a relationship. That's a really important balance. Give people room to be human, but don't abandon your wisdom. God knows what we don't know. Another idea that stood out to me was the idea of surrender. Sometimes we think we have to figure out everything ourselves. We have to determine, is this the person? Is this the opportunity? Is this going to work? But what if I make the wrong decision? But there is a certain freedom that comes from realizing I don't have to know everything. If you're walking with God, you can ask for wisdom and trust that you don't have to control every outcome. You can pay attention, you can use discernment, you can get advice, you can take your time, and you can trust God to reveal what you need to know. That doesn't mean ignoring red flags or making foolish decisions. It means you don't have to live in constant fear that you're going to miss the one perfect person or make one irreversible mistake. One of the more interesting concepts in the book was the distinction that the author describes as a contract type marriage and a covenant marriage. The idea is that a relationship can become unhealthy when two people are essentially looking to each other to fill every need. My happiness depends on you. My security depends on you. You need to make me feel complete. That's a tremendous amount of pressure to put on another human being. Instead, the healthier picture is two people who have God as their ultimate source and come alongside each other. You're not asking another person to fill a God sized hole in your life. You're building a life together while each person has their own relationship with God. And that connects to another idea in the book that really resonated with me. There's a difference between wanting someone and needing someone to complete you. Another thought I love from the book is the reminder that you don't need everyone's permission to live the life God has for you. I think this applies far beyond marriage. Sometimes we wait for approval, we wait for someone else to validate our choices. We compare our timeline to everyone else's. We think, why isn't my life looking like theirs? But your story isn't their story. You don't have to live according to someone else's timeline. And you don't need everyone's approval to pursue what you believe God has placed on your heart. God does his part and we do our part. And perhaps the biggest takeaway for me was this: God has a part to play and we have a part to play. We can't do God's part, but we also can't expect God to do the things he has given us the responsibility to do. If there's healing we need to pursue, we need to pursue it. If there are unhealthy patterns we need to address them. If we need to learn how to communicate better, we need to learn. If we need to become more emotionally healthy, we need to work on that. If we've been hiding from life because we're afraid of being hurt again, maybe it's time to start living again. And we don't have to do all of that alone. The book talks about the grace and help available to us through the Holy Spirit. And I think that's encouraging because the message isn't fix yourself and then maybe God will love you. It's the opposite. God is with you in the process. Healed people help heal people. This was one short idea in the book that really stuck with me. The concept that people who have experienced healing can eventually become a source of healing for others. I love that because it changes the way we look at our difficult experiences. Maybe your pain isn't the end of your story. Maybe what you've learned through it will eventually help someone else. Maybe the season of loneliness taught you something about yourself. Maybe the disappointment forced you to deal with something you had avoided for years. That doesn't mean we have to be grateful for everything that hurt us, but we can allow God to use what we've been through. So what do we do with all of this? If you're single and hoping for marriage, I don't think the takeaway from this book should be, okay, I have 12 months to find somebody. That's not the message I would take from it. Instead, I would ask, what can I work on now? What beliefs are holding me back? What disappointments am I carrying? Have past experiences created blind spots? Am I expecting the worst from people? Am I looking for perfection? Am I ignoring warning signs because I'm afraid of being alone? Am I actually preparing for the kind of relationship I say I want? And most importantly, am I allowing God to work on me while I'm waiting for what I'm asking him for? Because maybe the waiting isn't wasted time. Maybe it's preparation. Maybe it's healing. Maybe it's learning. Maybe it's becoming. And maybe the thing you've been praying for isn't simply about finding someone. Maybe it's also about becoming the person who is ready for the relationship when it arrives. If you're interested in faith, relationships, healing, and becoming the person God created you to be, I think Married in 12 Months or Less by Jackie Dorman gives you a lot to think about. And I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever realized that disappointment changed the way you saw something or someone in your life? Leave a comment and tell me your experience. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need this message.